Persian or Greek, no man threatens a messenger.
You bring the crowns and heads of conquered kings to my city steps. You insult my queen. You threaten my people with slavery and death. Oh, I've chosen my words carefully, Persian. Perhaps you should have done the same.
This is blasphemy. This is madness!
This is Sparta!
The film 300 is a sword-swinging, chest-thumping bloodbath that opened 2 weekends ago in theaters across the country. It took the #1 spot, grossing over $70 million in its first weekend. Yet despite the film's financial success, it has been receiving mixed reviews. Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune says, "For a film with lots of flesh and even more blood, it's light on flesh and blood characters." Lisa Schwartzbaum of Entertainment Weekly says, "This is a dazzle for the head and not the heart." And Richard Robert of the Chicago Sun-Times calls the film the Citizen Kane of cinematic graphic novels. The film has also received criticism for its not-so-hidden overtones concerning America's Middle East foreign policy. The film has even been banned in Iran, where Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's art advisor says that the film is part of a comprehensive U.S. psychological war aimed at Iranian culture. The film is a 2007 adaptation of the graphic novel 300 by Frank Miller. Both the graphic novel and the film are fictionalized accounts of the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. The film is directed by Zack Snyder, with Frank Miller serving as an executive producer and consultant. The film is different from most other sword and sandal films, and that most of it was shot using a blue screen to duplicate the imagery of the original comic book. Today we have with us Christopher Sharrett, who is a film critic and professor of communications at Seton Hall University. Professor Sharrett, in the film, Spartan King Leonidas marches 300 Spartan soldiers to meet the Persian threat. The Spartans are portrayed as being an almost Aryan-like race in the film, superior in every way to their enemies, the Persians, with chiseled pecs and abs to prove it. On the other hand, the Persians are depicted as being either non-human, non-white, or extremely effeminate, with enough piercings to even make a goth kid blush. A.O. Scott commented on this very fact in an article in the New York Times by saying, "It may be worth pointing out that unlike their mostly black and brown foes, the Spartans and their fellow Greeks are white." So, Professor Sharrett, what do you think the purpose was behind this depiction of race in the film?
Well, Boyd, I think it's been the same purpose that we see in Hollywood over the generations, which is to create a comic book view of the world, if the source is a comic book or not. I mean, I can think when John Wayne made his film The Alamo, or later on in the same decade of the 60s, The Green Berets, which is about Vietnam. And the film had about as much to do with Vietnam as I do with nuclear physics. But you know, it's a cheap thrill. It does have racialist overtones, but you see racism at the very origins of the cinema. In a film like Birth of a Nation by Griffith. It's a story of the American Civil War told from a Confederate perspective, where slavery is portrayed as something fairly positive. So this goes on, and it doesn't surprise me that you take this story. After all, the story of the 300 Spartans is a classic last stand narrative of a few men facing hordes of bad guys who are generally swarthy looking and so forth. It's like the Alamo, if you study that in Southwest history. I mean, it's the way the Anglos tell it anyway. So it's really fodder for the industry. And I'm not surprised that Hollywood is picking up on it at this time. The comic book cinema is a very popular genre because it is so, what can I say, at its worst. I mean, it's very, very simple-minded, and it's based on action and not much text or thought behind it.
A few years ago, Frank Miller's graphic novel Sin City was adapted to film. How do you think that this graphic novel was adapted to film in comparison with that one?
Well, the graphics look similar. I mean, comic book cinema goes back a long ways. It goes back into the 1930s. It was always popular because why not take this popular medium out of the Sunday funnies, out of comic books, and turn it into something else for the big screen. The problem was the technology was not very good, so you end up with all these guys wearing long underwear with insignias on their chests. It looks pretty silly. Now you've got the technology to really more or less blend the two media together, so that the screen version of the 300 or Sin City looks the same as what the fans have already purchased in their comics, and that apparently gives the film what's the term, street cred. It makes it acceptable, and it also looks flashy. And but the issue here is the work's significance or lack thereof. What is it really doing? Sin City, the comic book and the film, is a recycling in a very exaggerated way, to, in my view, no good purpose, of many different film noir, the crime films of the 1940s and 50s, but done in a very glossy style with CGI and so forth. But I think 300 is similar because it's copying the style of Frank Miller and people who crafted the two graphic novels.
Richard Roper of the Chicago Sun-Times calls the film the Citizen Kane of the cinematic graphic novels, and many critics have been echoing this same sentiment regarding the visual effects of the film. So, Professor Sharrett, do you think this is the Citizen Kane of cinematic graphic novels?
People speak in these hyperbolic terms when they want to get noticed. Citizen Kane is Citizen Kane. I mean, maybe 300 has achieved something particular in the way of technical achievement, but who cares? I mean, we're in an age when people are fixated on technique alone. Wells had great command of technique, but his concern was ideas. Technique is a means to an end. To say that a film is really superior in technique is like saying somebody did a fine typing job, on an essay or on a novel or something. I mean, who cares finally? But we're in this age where there's a kind of fetishizing of the technology. So if something looks flashy and you kind of go, oh wow, I mean, that impresses people, and I think that's a real shame, because it puts on a back burner the other traditional values, we use the term, of writing and thinking. So I think that's a problem.
اول اشي لازم نمتلكه هي المبادرة، اسمع افهم استغرق تقدر تناديها محاضرة. احنا بمصارعة اللي من زمان ثبتونا فيها بينادوها مؤامرة وعدم وعي اللي مخليها. اعرفكم عن نفسي انا من بلد اسمها اللي فيها اللي بوطن ما بدفع الثمن وفيها اللي بهدلل. الناس اللي عملوا غلط بنوا على ارضهم، وكل اللي بيصير بس عشانهم لوحدهم غير. وقف على موقف اللي شر